Hello and welcome to another screencast, this time in prohibited methods and specifically looking at blood doping. So again, just a reminder, the yellow text boxes are tasks for students, the green text boxes are the note-taking sections for students, the blue text boxes are differentiated tasks, and the red text boxes are for the teaching and learning strategies and ideas specifically for the practitioner. So for this topic, the syllabus asks you to understand what we mean by that term blood doping. And not only that, be able to, once you're confident with knowing what blood doping is, knowing what some of the side effects are, and ultimately how they have physiological, so to do with the body, how they have the impact on the body in regards to blood doping. Okay, so what specific athletes might use blood doping and why it will impact and how it will impact on performance. So let's get cracking. All right, first and foremost, if we look at blood doping as a key term. So by blood doping, we're talking about a technique or a substance, okay, which increases a performer's red blood cell count. Okay, so when we think about blood doping, we're thinking about increasing that red blood cell count. Okay, so we can actually define blood doping as an artificial way of increasing the number of red blood cells in the blood. So just want you to pause your video here and think about what is the purpose of red blood cells, okay, in our body, and ultimately how does it impact on sporting performance. Okay, so hopefully you've got a few ideas down in regards to, well, first of all, what's the purpose of red blood cells? So red blood cells obviously transport oxygen to our working muscles, so they are very important. And if we think of the cells, if we think of how the makeup of red blood cells, they have hemoglobin, don't they? Okay, within the middle part of that red blood cell, and ultimately that's what helps deliver and carry that oxygen to the working muscles. Ultimately, how does that impact on performance? Well, from a sporting point of view, we need oxygen to the working muscles when we are participating in sport, because ultimately we need that as part of our energy production. We need that in terms of our aerobic capacity, and we need that obviously to produce and create energy, which will then help us become less fatigued. So let's think of the blood doping process. Okay, so first and foremost, in regards to this process, what we do is we would normally, as an athlete, we would remove about 2 pints of blood. Okay, and we'd normally do this roughly 2 or 3 weeks prior to the specific event or competition that we're about to take part in. And ultimately, as we do that 2-3 weeks before the competition, our body recognizes and realizes that we've lost that blood, okay, and ultimately it starts making more blood, and as it makes more blood to obviously counterbalance the fact that we've lost 2 pints, is it creates and replicates and reproduces more red blood cells. So once that's happened, once our body has done that process, okay, what we then do is we ensure that we the removed blood that we've sort of taken out few weeks before the competition, we make sure it's frozen, okay, and then 1 or 2 days before that competition, okay, what we then do is we take it out of the freezer, we thaw it so that it's ready to be injected back into the athlete. And ultimately, we can also say that the drug, the performance enhancing drug of EPO, is also a form of blood doping, because blood doping isn't just this process of removing blood and injecting it back into the performer. We can find other artificial ways of obviously increasing our red blood cell count. So EPO would be one of them. Okay, so pause your video here, try and answer this question. So which type of athletes are likely to use the blood doping process? And once you've done that, also think about, what do you think are the health risks associated with blood doping? Okay, so hopefully you've come up with some different examples in regards to, first of all, blood doping, who would do blood doping, and ultimately it will be endurance athletes. So in particular, marathon runners, okay, cyclists will be prime candidates and examples of blood doping. And we've got examples, haven't we, of, for example, Lance Armstrong, who was caught obviously in terms of drug cheating and more specifically in terms of blood doping. What are some of the side effects? Well, ultimately, one of the first side effects in regards to this process is that it increases blood viscosity. And what we mean by blood viscosity is that it's this idea of thickening of the blood. If we think of blood as a liquid, okay, think of this process of once it's taken place, blood becomes a bit more sludgy. Okay, think of it like a slush puppy or some sort of iced drink. Okay, it becomes thicker, and ultimately as it becomes thicker, that also increases the chances of a heart attack. And that heart attack might take place, okay, because of blood clots. And you can see there in terms of that last point, okay, blood clots occur obviously due to blockages of blood vessels. And one of the other risks that occurs is that we might get, for example, through this process, things like blood-borne diseases such as HIV or hepatitis. Okay, so let's move on to exam station. Okay, so I want you to again pause the video here, look at this question, explain how blood doping could improve the performance of a marathon runner. Use these key terms, these key sentence starters, phrases to help you answer that question if you need it. Okay, so hopefully you've answered that question and you've come up with a few different examples. Okay, it's a 3-mark question, so we need to make sure we've got 3 clear points. So one of the clear points that you could have mentioned is about the fact that the marathon runner obviously needs more red blood cells. Okay, that's going to help him or her with their performance. Second of all, the fact that we've got an increase in red blood cells is going to increase that aerobic capacity. So there's a greater oxygen amount being carried to the working muscles. I have also mentioned about the fact that this therefore allows the performer to run faster and for longer before fatigue sets in. Okay, so that's 3 clear marks there in terms of needing more red blood cells. Okay, the fact that we increase our aerobic capacity, and finally about the fact how does it impact on performance. Ultimately we can run faster and harder for longer due to the fact that we are reducing muscle fatigue. Okay, so for the teachers, in terms of teaching and learning strategies for this quick topic, okay, first and foremost, you can look at debating, so making sure that you ask different ethical questions related to this specific topic of drug taking. Okay, so what are the implications of blood doping, in particular for sport and spectators? Okay, also get them to look at research tasks. So can you get them to research at home in terms of homework tasks of examples of blood doping? Try and do some odd one out rounds, okay, whereby you've got 4 or 5 different pictures of different athletes. Who's the odd one out? Who's maybe blood doped and who was taking other drugs and who was maybe banned, for example, like Rio Ferdinand, for actually just missing a drug test. So they can look at, for example, the odd one outs, and then acronyms as well. So make sure you've got different acronyms to remember the advantages and disadvantages of this topic of PEDS. Best of luck with this.